I'm Chair of the Eastham Water Management Committee, and we are meeting in the Earl Mountain Room. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 18 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. As an aside, I always have a difficulty when I go to say Earl Mountain, because I want to say, for some strange reason, Earl Warren. That's what pops into my head, and I have to pull back and say, Earl Mountain. Okay. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the October meeting, and that's Jeff.
I emailed everybody a copy of the draft, and then there were some revisions, so you would have gotten a second email. Does anyone need a copy of those minutes?
Or if
draft?
anyone wants to see them, I can put them up.
I will take one.
Would you like to see it? Yeah, okay. Anyone else need one? No?
Well, if you got an extra one, I'll look at
Sure.
it, but I've
No.
got one here somewhere too.
Mary Lou, you've seen it, okay?
I watched it live, so I don't get to vote on this matter, correct?
Yeah, I think so. The rules are sort of a little bit not precise on what one can and can't do, but I think generally members who did not attend the meeting abstain from voting.
Okay.
But if you see something there that needs correction for some reason, you're free to offer that.
Suzanne, do you mean you were actually a member of the meeting officially?
I am now.
No, I meant
Oh.
last week. We've
last
got all
time.
these notes about how you're supposed to do that. I was wondering how, you didn't notify them that you weren't part of the quorum.
No, I watched it. I was still in Arizona.
Just
and I
like,
watched it
just
live.
like anybody
Yeah,
else.
no, she
watching.
wasn't, what they're talking about is if you actually call in
Yes.
and you participate by phone.
Oh, yeah.
That was my question, because I didn't remember hearing your voice or anything.
That's done by phone if you're remote?
Yes,
that's-
yeah, and
Well,
you have to,
have audio.
you have to arrange it in advance. You know, you have to check with the chair in advance. For some reason, I can't get this thing to come down, which is not good. You check, it's just, I sent it out. I must admit, I didn't memorize it. I figured when and if the time came, I would read it and see what it was that had to be done. But the one thing I do know is you have to arrange with the chair in advance to have it done. It can only be one member of a committee at a time. You can participate, but you do not count towards a quorum. And, yeah.
Okay, that was.
There has to be a physical quorum, but you can participate in the meeting. Otherwise, you can vote, that sort of thing. And if there is an interruption, if the connection is lost, we have to attempt to reestablish the connection. And if that doesn't work, we have to suspend for a while we try to get it done, and those sorts of things.
Couldn't you
sorry,
just
I'm
say,
trying to
"Gee,
get
you
this
can
thing
watch
to
the rest of it on
resize here."
video"?
Pardon me?
I'm being facetious, but you could say, gee, you could just watch the rest of it on video.
Well, you could, but what I'm saying is what the policy provides. Since you have been recognized as a member for purposes of the meeting, the policy requires that we attempt to reestablish the contact so that you can continue to participate. You're watching it on the video, but you can't, you
Yes, you can't
wouldn't have an
participate.
opportunity to comment or anything like that. So that's what the purpose of it is. So that's, should the time come when you want to be hooked in by remote participation. I'm sorry, I always forget with this PDF how to get rid of the ribbon, which is a nuisance. So we'll have to deal with it the way it is. Okay, not on the agenda, but something that Jeff.
Excuse me, Adele, do you ask for a
Oh, yes,
motion
right,
on the
right,
minutes.
right, I got distracted here, right. So has everybody finished reading?
Yes, I have no amendments.
You done, Scott?
Yes. No, I had read it already.
I want to get rid of this ribbon, do you remember how to do that?
I'm personally fine with it.
Okay,
Anyone wanna,
no? And a motion to approve?
I'll say move.
Second?
Okay, very good, thank you. Luckily, someone knows how to work with my computer. Okay. This is not on the agenda, but as I said, Jeff reminded me about it this morning. I'd sent this information out before, some of it, but I thought it might be a good reminder. The opportunity to register for the Cape Coastal Conference is now available. This tells you a little bit about the conference, what it's going to be, or it should, if I can get it to move forward here. Yeah. The first day, you'll see, is pretty much about pre-planning, what to do in advance, recognizing that we have rising waters and that sort of thing, and so it's prepare. In fact, as I read this, I hope that this went to the planning committee, planning board, because obviously a lot of it in this relates to possible zoning changes, et cetera, and dealing with the new building and that sort of thing, to be in a better position to deal with this event if and when it comes. And then the second day is possibly more directly relevant to us. That talks about Cape Cod water resources, restoration policies. Unfortunately, I'm using some sort of out-of-date glasses, but restore the water quality through improved stormwater management, which of course is an issue all over, a particular issue for us because of Route 6 and Schoolhouse Minister. The value of long-term monitoring for restoration efforts, warming trends, and water quality, and using ecosystem assessments to inform coastal resilience strategies, Pleasant Bay case study, lessons from the Muddy Creek Restoration Project, and managing cyanobacteria in our ponds. And the first day is a full day, 9 to 5. The second day is 9 to 12:30, I think. I know it's a half day, and I think it's 9 to 12:30.
What days of the week are,
December 5th and
Monday
6th.
to Tuesday?
Yeah. Did you say,
Well, I registered.
okay, I did too. Did you say
and-
Monday and Tuesday? I thought it was Tuesday and Wednesday.
Tuesday.
Is it?
Oh, the second, I think is, oh, yeah, you might be right. I think the second is a
Yeah.
Saturday.
So that's it, and,
Bill? If some of these conferences are really important that you want everybody to go to, can you kind of assess their importance to us? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what you think we should be
I don't
doing
know,
for-
I guess if you felt your time was limited, you might, the most useful information to you for what you're doing might be the second day, rather than the first day, which does, if you have a general interest in the subject, they're both very important days. But if you're looking at it just from the perspective of this committee, the second day is more directly focused on what we're doing. And there is, close this one. There's a link here. That's the announcement. Okay. Here's the register today sort of thing. And that. Obviously, you can't get there from my email, but if you're you've already registered, Suzanne, and I can send this email out again, and anybody who wants to register can just click on that register link. There is no cost to this.
Are you both registered for both days?
Yeah, I have to leave early on the first day, but I signed up for both days.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure whether I could make both, but I was gonna do either one if it
Yeah.
meant coverage for us.
Yeah, you can, you do have the option to choose one day or the other when you register. I'm waiting to hear back on a job, so
Oh, I was gonna wait and make sure that there was gonna be somebody there both days and then choose. I'm tempted to do the first day. It looks really interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
If I could make the second day.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so, hit this little button here. And I found out this morning Jane will not be joining us. She has a conflicting meeting, which is unfortunately from your perspective, Claude, not good news, since Jane would have the most up-to-date information about what's going on with the schoolhouse minister. But I do know from report she gave at the Board of Health meeting at the end, were we November, at the end of October, probably aware that there is a study was done by a group called Solitude, a survey of the vegetation and the water there to prepare some recommendations about what they, well, first of all, to prepare a report on what they identified as the problem, and then to make some recommendations about how to proceed to deal with that problem. As of the end of October, that report had been received from Solitude, and it had been forwarded to Liz Moran, who works with us on water quality issues. She's the town's sort of consultant on those issues. So I expect that soon, if not already, I haven't heard from Jane, but we will be getting a report back from Liz about her assessment of the Solitude report and what that means, and then we would be in a position to make some decisions about what to do about the conditions at Schoolhouse Minister. The other thing, and unfortunately, I didn't take a lot of notes at the Board of Health meeting, which you reported, because I thought we'd get a report today, is she did report that there was some progress in working with Cape Cod National Seashore. You remember the issue there is the septic system that they have is not, in fact, trying to think of the right term to describe it, it is not working to the level of efficiency they had hoped when it was installed. And so there is some progress working with them, agreement on their part that it would be good to move forward and to try to take some steps to modify the current system. Modify may not be the right word, but in some way deal with the current system in a way to improve its efficiency and therefore decrease the nitrogen load from that system going into Salt Pond, so. if
And
that
that's
can
the one
happen.
that's directly related to the visitor center.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the system they have there, yeah, so. Okay. The next item is on dredging in Salt Pond,
In
and,
Salt Pond.
no, I'm sorry, dredging in Town Cove.
That,
Actually,
yeah.
it wasn't in Town Cove, it's the Sharon getting there, isn't it?
No, it's in Town Cove itself.
and
Yeah.
that, was that on our town, was that in the town meeting?
Yes.
Yes, that was on the town meeting.
Who attended? I was there.
I didn't attend it, I just saw, I think, maybe a review of how the town felt about things.
Was
I
not.
did
Or,
attend.
Yes.
All right, if you hold on just a second, I'll give you the motion. You won't have to guess about it. Okay. This was Article 5. Okay. So that's what it said. I move to raise and appropriate from fiscal year 2019 tax levy the sum of $200,000 for the purpose of funding the engineering study needed to obtain permits to dredge the Nauset estuary. Okay, obviously, this raises a lot of different matters, but I'm going to try to focus just on the ones that seem directly relevant to our committee at this point. First, notice that we're talking about fiscal year 2019. We're now in fiscal year 2018. The town's fiscal years run from July 1 to June 30th. So this is talking about appropriating from funds that will first become available on July 1, 2018. Because it's 2017, but we're in fiscal year 2018. On July 1, 2018, we'll be in fiscal year 2019. So they're talking about raising and appropriating from fiscal year 2019, July 1. Roughly, there is a feasibility study that was done for the town of Orleans, which was interested in proceeding with this. The feasibility study lays out a design for a channel, which is actually in Town Cove. I mean, I had intended to get involved in all the specifics of the dredging proposal. I do in fact have the feasibility study, and I can show you the channel if anybody.
Yeah, I looked it up too. See if I have it still on here.
Okay, I gotta find it here.
So the channel would be, the dredging of the channel in Town Cove would be on Orleans' side for.
No, it
No,
also
no.
is it's
It's
also
also-
in Eastham. You wait
Uh,
just a
I-
second, and I'll show you the,
I could put it up with,
oh, you have it?
well, I had the thing you gave us the link to, on my computer.
Okay,
The,
that's what I have too, right?
You got it?
Yeah, I
So the-
should have it.
So the general
Oh, there it
purpose,
is, right at the top one there.
the general purpose of the dredging would be for transit, not for,
Here we go.
because sometimes you
No,
dredge. to
the general
channel,
purpose is the idea,
And
okay.
sometimes you do it
As,
to.
as they, okay,
Some
let's wait a second now. Let's not all be guessing. The stated purpose is to improve navigation and public safety by facilitating safe passage for navigation, not only through the inlet and behind the barrier beach, but also to the key town landings such as Priscilla Road, Snow Shore Road, Tonsett Road, Aces Landing, Goose Hummock, and Cove Road, as well as other locations in Town Cove.
Okay.
Okay.
So is it simply that the channel is silting up?
Yes,
Yep.
that's it. It's what they call shoaling, but that's basically what it is.
Yes.
I'm trying to just quickly run through here and show the area maps.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I just said, so.
Okay. Now, the yellow line that runs through here is the town line. So you can see the channel crosses over. At some points, it's in Eastham, and other times it's in Orleans, and then it crosses back. And it is, this is Town Cove, so it clearly begins in Town Cove and then goes out into the area, goes basically towards the Barrier Beach and up to the current inlet.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't even say the current inlet, I guess it is, I don't remember if it's changed since. This is the location of the inlet in 2015, and that's where it goes. Okay, obviously, because they're dredging, there are lots of other kinds of questions raised about what is effective, the movement and that sort of thing. And as set out in the study, There is a need for further studies of hydrodynamics to evaluate the effect on bottom stress and increased potential for breach at the southern end. There could be some effects on the propagation of red tide cysts. This initial feasibility study thinks that will not happen. And then there could be effects on shellfish, including oysters, that the study is only looked at, and everything that they said in the study, they did say was a preliminary findings and required further study. The study only looked at the effects on quahogs, blue mussels, soft shell clams, and razor clams. There are existing aquaculture grants for oysters in there. I don't know if they're in that channel area or not, but they didn't seem to think there were any oysters in there. And then they also did not really address in any way the effect of the channel would have on eelgrass, because there is currently no eelgrass in that whole area. But there is no eelgrass because of the excess nitrogen. The MEP report in 2012 noted the absence of eelgrass and attributed it to the excess nitrogen. Now, obviously, one of our efforts, and one of Orleans' efforts also, is to reduce the excess nitrogen, and among other things, it would be hoped that the eelgrass would come back. So they do provide in the study, or not provide, but recommend in the study, that there be further studies which would cover all of these issues. So I think that is one thing we want to be sure of, is in fact that all of these things are looked at very closely, and that effects on shellfish include oysters. And if we have some sense of where it would be that we would have our oyster beds, were we to move forward, where those beds would be, and also how change in the channel, and it's not just a one-time change in the channel. It's estimated that channel area 1, which is, let me go back down here. I think I have a page reference here.
While you look for it,
It's behind the Barrier Beach. That's what I thought it was. Okay, that area,
That's
Is-
57.
yeah, this would be this area up here. There is a little map that shows all three, but I'm not quickly finding that. But anyway, that channel area 1, they estimate would have to be redredged every 1 to 3 years. So in looking at the effects that the dredging would have on these various environmental questions, you'd also have to consider, after the first dredging, and it's redredged, again, what are these effects? So it isn't like they dredge, and then, for example, we would create the oyster beds or whatever, because 1 to 3 years down the road, then there would be dredging again. So whatever study is done has to look not only at what happens with the first dredging, but what happens with recurrent dredging. So I think we just have to be careful to make certain that the studies that are done are informed by our preliminary thinking about Town Cove remediation methods, to make certain that all of this is taken into account, that the studies don't only look at current situation, or actual 2000, all of this was done in 2015. The studies, I'm certain, would look at what or hopefully would look at what the situation is now in 2017. But beyond that, we'll have to look at what the situation could be in years down the road, because, in fact, the feasibility study estimates that it would be 2 to 3 years after the beginning of the studies before any actual dredging work could begin. So effectively, since we're looking at July 2018, the earliest that Eastham money would become available, assuming they didn't start studies before then. Maybe they would with Orleans money. But in any case, it's 2 to 3 years after whatever that date is, yeah.
What are the chances that the study becomes obsolete? It sounds like this is a moving target.
It is. And that it's a very, and that's recognized in the study that because of the dynamic nature of the area, that it could be totally changed when people, you know, as plans go along. And what they have done is they have created a potential dredging zone, which is much wider than the proposed channel, with the idea that the channel could move within that zone as needed. I don't obviously don't have the expertise to evaluate whether or not this is from a hydrological standpoint, this is possible, sensible, whatever. I would guess at some point too, I don't know, maybe the town would want to have some qualified hydrologists look at this study and give them some advice rather than having to rely solely on the people who did the study for their analysis of their work. I mean, sometimes it's useful to have a second eye look at things.
The question, we talk, or they talk about the effect on shellfish.
Yeah.
Are they talking about a positive effect or not having a negative effect by doing the dredging?
Now, they did, I don't think they, I think what they were focused on, as I read it now, and this is only my
Yeah.
reading, that they were focused on showing it didn't have a negative effect.
Okay.
I didn't get the sense that they were saying it would make the environment better for them.
All those people got up afterwards, not the lady from Woods Hole Group, which they never mentioned. I thought she was Woods Hole Institute. They
No,
never said
no,
what she was.
excuse me.
What?
Let me speak on behalf of the moderator. He very carefully said, that's why you got to listen. He very carefully said, so-and-so from the Woods Hole Group.
I didn't hear the word group. I was listening for the word institute. I did not hear
Oh,
group.
no,
I
well,
didn't even know what the name of it
yeah.
was. I thought they were, and then
Well-
she got up, and it's obvious she was not from the institute.
No, she's from the Woods Hole Group. You know, Woods Hole is a town like any other, so
Right.
people can have, use it. in
So,
names.
I mean, theoretically, what I've gathered from some of our conversations is that the entire estuary could benefit from increased flow.
Yeah,
and
tidal
flushing.
flushing, yeah.
Flushing.
Tidal flushing, that is not to say that I would I would be interested to see from the coastal conference if they could shed any insight on whether or not this would be,
The woman who talked
A
did
good
not
idea.
say it would help the shellfish. In fact,
No.
she very carefully kind of avoided that, and then all the local people
Well,
got up
they
and
are doing
assumed
it
it
for,
would.
okay, let's not
So that
get
was
too
what was
deep
confusing.
into the weeds on this. That is part of the studies that they are planning to do.
Yeah,
There
it's
will
one
be a
of those.
study, there will be a number of environmental studies, in addition to the engineering, which only costs $17,000. They have a total of $195,000 for further data collection and the engineering study rolled in together. So that's about $178,000 for the data collection. And they will also have to be applying for permits, probably a MEPA permit, which will be looking at the environmental issues. So I just think we need to stay in close touch and make certain how the studies are designed
so it got
to
approved.
study these issues. Oh, the motion carried, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
I think two-thirds of the people in that room had decided they were going to vote yes before they walked in. That's why it was passed. I don't think the town as a whole would have passed it.
Well, we don't know,
Well, this
so
is-
all
No,
we
that's
know.
true.
This is
Okay.
what
Do not know.
happens when only select parts of a community or town or state go and
That's
vote
true.
on things.
Well, this wasn't a regular town meeting.
Oh.
I think if it was a regular town meeting, everybody would have been there.
Okay, I think we're off the
Special
topic.
There
Let's
will
get
be,
back on the
there will be
topic.
lots of other opportunity for the town to weigh in before any
Yeah.
more action is taken, I'm sure.
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Is that so?
it's possible that Claude just needs to tell us something. And normally, we do public comment at the very beginning of a meeting. Does that fit here?
Did you come here because you wanted to tell us something?
Well, what I came here because we.
Wait, if you want to speak, come up to the table.
Come here. Otherwise, people at home have no idea what you're saying.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking. I came because my neighbors and us, we are concerned about Minister's Pond, and we have been waiting, like you mentioned, for the result of the study, or the comments about the study, because it seems like so far nobody could quite agree on what would be helpful to clean the pond. And so that's why I came. And also, I wanted you to know that we are concerned, and we're not too sure what will be helpful, and so here we are.
We are aware of your concerns, and we share your concerns, actually. We've been, since the pond, the first pond plan was developed, I guess, 2011 or so, and shortly after that, we identified 3 ponds as priority ponds for action: Great, Herring, and Schoolhouse Minister, which some people call it 2 ponds. We deal with it as 1 pond with 2 basins. And so we have been looking since that time for various ways to address it. And at one point, your president of your association, Sharon Shipley, had provided us with some information about the possibility of using alum in a shallow pond, which generally it's thought can't be done, but she provided us with some studies that showed it had been done in the West. Unfortunately, when those things were researched, it was found that they didn't work in ponds that had a high degree of vegetation, because the vegetation, again, I'm not a scientist, but the vegetation had some negative effect on the alum in a shallow pond, so that methodology wouldn't work. There was some consideration of various aeration methods, and I think we never found anything that would truly seem to work, and also there was some concern, I think, about some of the abutters about if aeration involved a fan or something of that type, the noise that would be caused. So that's why we then turned to this vegetation survey, which, when it seemed that the vegetation was the major concern of the abutters, the amount of vegetation on the surface of the pond, we were required to do a survey of that, first of all, to find out if there were any protected species, because it's not just animal life, fish life, there's also certain types of vegetation that can exist in ponds that are protected in Massachusetts. And if that's so, then we can't remove them, or we have to get certain special permits to do so. And so that's why we turned to this vegetation survey to determine what the vegetation is that's in the pond, how widespread it is, and what the recommendations. This Solitude is a company that has worked on these issues before in terms of pond remediation, and to get their recommendations as to what they thought was the most effective way to deal with it. And that's the survey that was received back from us. You know, they could only obviously do their work in the warm weather. They can't, because they have to see what's growing in the pond. So that basically they worked on this over the past summer, looking at what's in the pond and assessing it and that sort of stuff. And we got their report in October. That went to Liz Moran, who is with a group called Ecologic, who are the people who prepared our original pond action plan. And she was to assess that report and then get back to us on her comments, if any, on their recommendations, her suggestions as to best courses of action. And as I said, because the health agent the person who handles this back and forth is not here today, I don't know whether or not we've heard back from Ms. Moran yet. We could have, since it was sent to her sometime in October, this being No, this is only early November, that's right. I keep thinking I'm ahead of myself with Thanksgiving. So we may not have heard, but if we haven't heard from her, I would expect that we would shortly. And I think at that point, we would be writing to the pond abutters from whom we've heard. And also, is Sharon Shipley still the president of your association?
Oh, yes, I think she
Okay,
is,
so we
yes.
would write to Sharon, and she could obviously share it with anybody. If you want to be included in that, if you want to give your address
Sure,
to the
that would be
clerk,
good.
then we'll make certain you get a copy of anything that goes out.
Right, yes,
Okay?
yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I can give you my address.
Sure. How do you wanna?
So I give you my mailing address in Connecticut.
Sure. Yeah, if that's where you would like to receive it.
And I just want to say that, my wife is from Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and some of the lakes there are in terrible condition. And I went swimming there this past summer, and, you go crazy swimming there because the weeds are just like almost to the surface. So what you see is actually very deceiving. What you see is it's a wonderful lake, but actually it's a
Yeah,
dying
it's
lake.
clogged, yeah.
And I think that's what's happening to Minnesota Pond.
Right.
So I don't want
What
that to
lake
happen.
was this?
Um,
I'm from Wisconsin.
yeah, the little one by the zoo.
In Milwaukee?
No, in Madison. Madison.
Oh, yes, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Mendota?
No,
No,
Mendota
no, it's
is
a
a big
small one. It's,
yes.
yeah. Oh,
It
gosh,
sounds
what is
like
it?
Viagra, but it's not Viagra. I don't know why I think of Viagra. It's like
Wingra.
Yeah, Wingra. Thank you.
Wingra.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and it's just terrible. And I swim in Minister's Pond, and it's a great pond. So we would like to keep it healthy.
Yes, well, I think
So that's why I came.
we would do. It's, our ponds are one of our greatest assets, and we certainly,
Yeah, yeah, and I know one of the pond was cleaned up in Eastham.
Herring and great.
herring
Yeah,
and great,
yeah.
yeah. The difference there is those are both deep ponds,
Right.
whereas, as I said, Schoolhouse Minister is a shallow pond. And the general professional view is you cannot use alum in a shallow pond. And alum was used in great and herring because of the depth, and it produced good results. We proceeded on the assumption we couldn't use it in Schoolhouse Minister because it was shallow. And then we looked into the report that said it had been used in some shallow ponds, but that same report said, but it doesn't work if there's a lot of growth, macrophytes, which is what you have. That's what
Right.
that growth in the pond is called. It doesn't work in shallow ponds where there's a lot of macrophytes. So then we had to look for other methods of dealing with it, which is what we're doing now, and hopefully we've come to some sort of positive conclusion. We'll know shortly. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Okay. You turn to the implementation report. First of all, I guess a little background to remind people what this is all about. Why do we have an That's why I need to bring water. Why do we have an implementation report? The 208 plan was adopted in 2015, but was not intended to be a static instrument that would stay, that's it, here's our plan, now go forth. It is updated each year with reports on implementation, and the plan itself commits the Cape Cod Commission to provide reports on local progress in implementing steps to deal with excess nitrogen, to implement those steps to deal with it that are laid out in the 208 plan. It requires annual reports, which are shared with both the Department of Environmental Protection and the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency. And the reports are based on the commission's monitoring of actions by the WMAs, waste management authorities. As you remember, the way that the 208 plan says that these WMAs are the towns, in effect, they are the Board of Selectmen. So the WMA for Eastham is our Board of Selectmen. What the implementation report looks at is it covers what's been done to date and what's next. For our purposes, I think maybe the next steps or the most relevant, the most useful to look at. You got to aim it straight. It doesn't work on an angle. And this is the next steps begin here on the bottom of page 9.
So- Slight question per discussions we've had with you, and where exactly might this report and the one that we looked at previously, the Nauset feasibility study, be located?
It was identified in an email I sent out
But where did you get it?
off the Cape Cod Commission website, but I gave you a link to where this report is in an email, which is in fact,
As I remember, I first
yeah.
found it.
And I
simply
also, it's in our
by
agenda, actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
I found it by a Google search. If you give the exact right title,
Yeah.
you come up with it.
Yeah, you have the agenda,
both of them?
right?
No.
Okay.
No, that's just-
Oh, there you
Item
go.
Sorry, I
five.
put two things over there instead of one.
It gives you the link to the implementation report, and then gives you the link to the watershed reports. Okay, there's a discussion beginning on page 9 of, fortunately, if I make it full screen, I don't think I can get the stuff on the bottom, which I need in order to move. Let me just see. I think that's what happens. That'll disappear also, yeah. I can't, oh, maybe I can do page numbers here. Will that allow me to do page numbers? No, that just allows me to exit. So, fortunately, we will have to bear with,
It was much better where you were,
what?
previous screen.
I know, but then I can't, I need to hop around between pages, and I can't do it on the other screen. I can go back and forth, I guess. Anyway, this is, because when I do full screen, I lose everything. I lose what I call the ribbon and also this thing at the bottom, which is the page locator. Okay, so there's a discussion here of the priority watersheds. If you go on, you see that one of them is, what for reasons known only to themselves, in this particular report, they call Nauset Marsh, but actually what they mean is Nauset Harbor. And the significance of the 11 priority watersheds, if you've looked at this, you will have noticed that each one of these watersheds is one that is shared, and which they consider, I guess, the most important target watersheds for remediation. But the significance also of being a priority watershed is that these watersheds and the progress taken in those watersheds will be more closely monitored with some not well-defined, but some sort of vaguely defined emphasis on accomplishment of something, possibly the beginning of construction by 5 years after the 2015 issuance, so that would be 2020. There are tasks laid out for the priority watersheds, which are current. First is to agree through an intermunicipal agreement with whatever other WMA shares the watershed, which in the case of Town Cove, or I shouldn't say Town Cove, in the case of Nauset Harbor, is primarily Orleans. Brewster also has a tiny little bit of it, but very little. To agree with, through these intermunicipal agreements on the nitrogen allocation in Nauset Harbor. who owns how much of it and how much, who is responsible for taking out how much. And that is to be accomplished in this current fiscal year, 2018. So that would require accomplishment before next July 1. The second thing is, and that would begin July 1, 2018, the plan and schedule for hybrid watershed scenarios development and develop scenarios consistent with the 208 plan in fiscal year 2019. We have some hybrid watershed scenarios, obviously, for the Salt Pond area of Town Cove. We also have some for what we're calling, I guess, I keep saying Town Cove, I'm sorry, Norset Harbor. We also have some for Town Cove. But what I would take from this, asking that this be done in fiscal year 19, is they would mean at that point some more definitive definition, decision on what the scenarios will be. And I would especially, we have not yet reached decisions on the Town Cove portion. And then there will be specific tracking of the priority watersheds based on progress they've made toward meeting the first two requirements: an intermunicipal agreement on nitrogen allocation, and plans and schedules for scenarios and scenario development. There are examples in the plan of, in the update of shared planning. They're on page 8. Should be on page, no, sorry. Trouble with this system is they provide let's see, I got to put in 14 to get page 8. Since the first few pages don't count in the Arabic numerals, when you put the numbers in, you have two sets of numerals. So these are areas, anyway, where they've had shared planning: Papaneset Bay, Pleasant Bay, Dennis, Harwich, Yarmouth, Chatham, and Harwich. And so there are examples laid out there that towns can look at for their purposes. Another strong stress in the implementation report is community engagement. If I can get to that one. No, I don't know why it does it this way. It takes me back to to their set of numbers rather than the way it's laid out on the screen. Now, let me see. I have 10 and 16, so let me try 16 and see if that works. Yeah, it's down at the bottom there. It's interesting because they talk about community engagement, but the first item under community engagement is talks about providing a third-party facilitator in the development of the intermunicipal agreements, who would have, not as their only role, but as a major role, managing any disagreement between the MAAs as to how to proceed, which is sort of I guess maybe that's where it fit. I don't know. But in any case, that is interesting that they have that, and I guess it could be particularly useful in certain areas. As you know, we don't necessarily agree with Orleans on certain items here. I don't know how, if at all, this would relate to the ongoing question of whether or not we have any access to Orleans treatment facility. I don't know whether that's the type of thing they have in mind as a area of disagreement. We would like to have access, and Orleans says no. So, it's part of that. A second area with, in community engagement is local public participation process, with efforts specifically designated to reach environmental justice communities. Eastham, I believe, and I was not able to find it quickly going back, so I'm relying on my memory. I believe at some point Eastham did receive a designation of an environmental justice community. So in any case, we would have to develop a local public participation process, and if, in fact, I am correct that we have an environmental justice community designation, our plans would have to specifically address that issue. The Commission staff will be available to help support the community planning and to assist with development of decision support tasks. I think by that they mean things like to help in the preparation of alternative scenarios, evaluation of technologies, that sort of thing, in terms of providing some material which provide a basis for making a decision about which way to go to the decision makers. They'd also assist with necessary permitting and with the development of the targeted wastewater management plan, which is another task that the WMAs have to accomplish. How this all takes effect is that the Cape Cod Commission is preparing to adopt regulatory amendments to basically substitute a system of determining consistency with the 208 plan for the previous DRIs, District of Regional Impact, or Development of Regional Impact, ways of reviewing things in terms of water quality and wastewater management plans. So these regulations will clearly establish that when you're developing these plans, your guideline is the 208 plan, and that's what you have to comply with. And applications for state grants will be reviewed for their consistency with the 208 plan. So you won't get state grants related to anything having to do with water in these respects, not drinking water, obviously, but surface waters, estuaries, unless the plan is consistent with 208. There will be development of a regional water quality monitoring program, which I think will be a plus. It'll collect historical data, and it'll develop a regional database, what is going on in all the, I'm going to say towns instead of WMAs, because I think it's a lot easier to deal with, in all the towns in this respect. And then that data will be accessible. When I say all, I don't know that that's outside of governmental organizations, but clearly will be accessible to all the towns through the web. Okay, the Commission, and whether this will have some payoff for us, I don't know. But the Commission is now working with the Mass Department of Transportation on issues like stormwater runoff, and it will continue that work. It will aim basically at remediating the effects that the stormwater runoff is having on surface waters in various towns. That may bear some fruit. I don't know. So far, Department of Transportation does not have seemed very amenable to any of these things. Got a note here about adequate septage development, which I'm going to have to see what I mean. Oh, okay. They're also going to be working, oops. With local publicly owned facilities and their operators to ensure adequate septic disposal coverage in the future. A couple of years ago, I don't think it ever went very far, the commission was talking about doing a survey of septic needs on the Cape as a whole, and then perhaps considering the establishment of 4 regional septic treatment sites that could then serve the whole Cape based on where the needs were. Maybe that did go someplace, I don't know, it doesn't ring any bells with me about having heard any resolution of it, but I would guess this recommendation, 2017.18, is looking that same way, to look at the public facilities and look at how they're handling septic disposal. Now, I don't think I would imagine that would to some extent mean how they are making themselves available to other towns that don't have those facilities, because adequate septic disposal in their own towns, I think, would be almost a given. So the question is, what are they doing in other areas? So, as you can imagine, that presents a bit of a workload in the remainder of this year and the next year in terms of what has to be accomplished to comply with this. I don't know, any comments, any thoughts? No, we can move on.
Adele, the watershed reports for our 5 watersheds, do you know how they would sort of touch into what you were just talking about?
Yeah, the watershed reports are their individualized implementation report for each of the watersheds on the Cape. It's part of this whole, the watershed reports are an appendix. There are a number of appendices, but the watershed reports are an appendix to this report. And my understanding is that there will be a new watershed report every year, just like there'll be a new implementation report, because the Cape Cod Commission will be reporting on their conclusions as to what has happened in the watershed over the past year, what change. They won't identify as a change, but they will report on the status of the watershed as of the end of that year, so just like they do now. And I guess we could look quickly at the watershed report. I'm only going to look at one of them, the Rock Harbor one. No, Dorset Harbor. Okay. I'm glad to say that we have, depending upon how you think of Dorset Harbor and Salt Pond, if you treat Salt Pond as a part of Dorset Harbor, which it is, we have 5 watersheds really to deal with, sub-embayment watersheds more, but 5 watersheds. Of those, there are only 2 for which we have whole or partial responsibility that are considered to have a high threat levels. 2 of them are low, and 1 of them is moderate. So, at least for now, I think our main focus needs to be Dorset Harbor, because the Rock Harbor thing, although it's classified as high, I think is somewhat up in the air as to what it should be. Okay. It's a general scheme of these watersheds reports is all the same. They start out telling you what is the Cape Cod Commission's assessment of what the nitrogen load is, the attenuated nitrogen load. Okay, fancy words, attenuated, unattenuated. if you look for a definition of these things, the scientific definitions don't say very much to me. They sort of definitions that repeat the term being defined, which I guess I was taught in basic English years ago is not how you define something. The way I understand them, which may be too basic to be accurate, is that the unattenuated load is the amount of nitrogen that goes into the ground from whatever source. So the unattenuated nitrogen load from a septic system would be whatever that septic system, whatever nitrogen that septic system is putting into the ground. The attenuated load is what remains in the groundwater when it reaches the surface water body, because natural elements in the soil and otherwise remove some of the nitrogen as it travels through the ground. So the total attenuated nitrogen load is the Commission's conclusion as to how much nitrogen there is in the groundwater when it reaches the water body, in this case, Nauset Harbor. So that's it. And then they break it down by these various areas, Nauset Marsh, Town Cove, Salt Pond, etc. I don't know that we need to go through, unless you have some questions that you want, I don't know we need to go through all of that. I think the interesting, most of it is set out right at the beginning in terms of how much is to be taken out. Total attenuated load is 2745. And back here, if I can get to it, they come up with a table. Tells you total attenuated load to be removed. Now that number, 10,415, includes it's mostly wastewater, but it's also fertilizer and stormwater, a little bit. Now, obviously, there are other sources of nitrogen in the water. There are all sorts of atmospheric sources and that sort of thing. The reason that isn't looked at here is there's nothing we can do about the atmospheric sources. They are. It will rain, and that's going to happen. And whatever other atmospheric sources there are. So that's why, and as you can see, just by looking at these numbers on their findings with respect to Nauset Harbor, fertilizer plays a small part, stormwater a little bit more, but still the bulk of it is wastewater from our septic systems. And so that's the total watershed load. And they have, they're basically in, well, we'll get to that actually in the two technical memoranda, the share, but roughly 75% of the attenuated nitrogen wastewater load going into Nauset Harbor has to be removed, and we are responsible for 25%. Now, it still befuddles me as much as I've looked to figure out, are they talking about 25% of 75% or 25%? I don't think they're talking about a third of the total, but I found it very difficult to analyze it, so I just stick with what the numbers are, which we have in the technical memo number 3. Okay, anybody have any other questions about the watershed reports? You will see this same pattern over and over each year, because this is the way they do.
And these are for the 11 priority watersheds?
No, every town has to report on every watershed that's been, every estuary watershed within their town boundaries or that they share with another. So that there are many more. If you look at the bottom of that page, that link there that takes you to the appendices, if you look at the bottom there of the page, which is where they are, you'll see a long list of watersheds. There's a
Well, it
Upper
didn't seem to
Cape,
me we
Mid
could
Cape.
have all the priority ones, but
Oh, yeah, no, no, everybody has to report, whether they're a priority or not. It's just that there will be a greater focus, I think, on activity in the priority watersheds.
And one of those is Nauset Harbor.
Yeah.
So my understanding of this, so you have Eastham and Orleans, and you're both kind of like, we've both been looking at this and that
Yeah.
to accomplish remediation of nitrogen and phosphorus in the waterways. And then the implementation report, more specifically calls for towns that do share a waterway to come up with a joint plan.
A watershed, yeah, an intermunicipal agreement, basically.
Okay.
As to how,
And
as to the responsibility, in other words, that they have set out general parameters as to who's responsible for the nitrogen going into the water body. But they want the towns themselves to agree to that shared responsibility, that they agree this much is mine, this much is yours, and then,
figure out what each town is gonna do
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Well, the scenarios themselves don't have to be in the municipal agreements. At this point, now, this doesn't mean, their language, as I recall it, about the intermunicipal agreements is that they would at least deal with the question of responsibility. That just doesn't mean that the scope of the agreements won't be expanded as time goes on. But at this point, it's basically the responsibility for, who's responsible for the nitrogen going in, agreed upon nitrogen allocations between the two towns. And then the following year, a plan and schedule for hybrid watershed scenario development. Now, that is not necessarily in the intermunicipal agreement, that's independent. The town come up with that by itself and develop scenarios consistent.
But that's
with that
something the
plan.
commission would like to see next year?
No, that says fiscal year 19.
Okay.
So that's, the fiscal years start July 1. So it starts July 1, 2018.
Okay.
And so they would expect to see that and, I guess, on or before June 30th, 2019, the plan and schedule for hybrid watershed scenario development. Okay. All right, so we finished with the watersheds.
Ago, have there been established target dates of implementation?
Well, just as I said there, that they want these two things done by one in fiscal year 18. You mean implementation in terms of actual construction?
Correct.
In the initial 2015 plan and the discussions of the plan, they talked about a 5-year time frame for some action by the priority watersheds.
So that makes
I-
it 2020?
Yeah. Now, I did not have time to get back to that. I don't think that means that they would expect everything would be in place in 2020, but they would expect to see something in place in 2020 in terms of actual construction. Like if we were going ahead with permeable reactive barriers, that there would be a permeable reactive barrier in
And
place. by then.
which of the consulting firms are going to recommend what we do?
Well, they basically already have done, which is what these two technical memos are. That's GHD. Now, I mean, they make recommendations. Obviously, Jane is more conversant with this. I assume after they've made their recommendations, well, in fact, it is going on now. They recommended a permeable reactive barrier for Salt Pond, and the work is going on now to establish where best to put that barrier,
So
what
the
size
design
it
is
would
in
have to be.
Progress, or in.
Yeah, now GHD doesn't do that part of it. That's a more, I think, of an engineering part
Right.
and a different sort of expertise that looks to that. But they made their recommendations based on what technologies they thought, based on the current circumstances, would work and would be doable in the circumstances. You have to have a certain land for the permeable reactive barrier, certain clearance, that sort of certain depth.
And we talked earlier about the visitor center having somewhat of an inadequate nitrogen removal in their system.
Well,
Do they
I don't
have
know
an
if we ever
IA
used the
system there?
terms inadequate. I think it was not, it is not operating as efficiently as it was thought it was going to be, and so
Is it a
that's
standard system, or is it a?
I don't know the details of this system. I doubt if it's standard. It's probably something specially developed for institutional use.
Yeah, no, the technical manual 3 says it's an Orenco, and that's one of the major firms that makes the essential hardware, the tanks and the pumps and that kind of stuff. So, but I have a sense that the seasonal, big flow in the summer, small flow in the winter is part of the problem. Because, they put in a brand-named system that would be otherwise working.
Okay. I'm going to move on to technical, yeah, I think the important thing to remember, though, is that the seashore does seem interested in trying to cure this problem and work towards a cure, so hopefully
So
that will
will
come
that
to pass.
likely work its way into future plans?
Well, I guess, let's see, how would I say it? The plans may acknowledge that this work is ongoing and expected to have X result, but, it's obviously not something we can ourselves accomplish. We can, we can work with the seashore to that sort of thing, but we don't control it. The plans, basically, that are adopted are things that we control.
Oh, as the town?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
as a WMA.
The PRM would be upstream from the visitor center anyhow, wouldn't it?
The what would be upstream?
The permeable reactive
Yeah,
area
yeah.
would be upstream, so he wouldn't even be able to intercept anything coming out of the visitor center.
No, well, that's why,
to
originally,
both
I
be
think there was a thought maybe it would be at the visitor center, but it's not going to be now, clearly from which directions it's going. But that's why the hope is that the visitor center itself will do something to deal with their system, and that will be in addition to what we're able to deal with. Sorry, I'm just looking for technical memo 3 here. Thought I had pulled it out, but I guess I didn't. When I have nothing else to do, I'll go back and clean out my computer and get rid of all the stuff I don't need.
Like clean out your closets.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. It would be helpful if my computer had a bigger screen, but unfortunately, then I wouldn't be able to carry it around. I had one with a bigger screen for a while. It didn't work. Okay, technical memo 3, which you've all seen before. And you remember, they're estuary, harbor, same thing. Embayment, the whole harbor, sub-embayments, the various areas like Salt Pond, Town Cove, Nauset Stream, all of that sort of stuff. Okay. also got the presentation a long while ago. You may have forgotten that was made to the Board of Selectmen on June 1st, I believe it was, June 1st or June 21st, recommending basically that we focus first on activity for Salt Pond, on testing out various recommendations that were made with respect to Salt Pond. If you look at page 2, you see all the technologies that were evaluated in coming up with these recommendations, PRBs, permeable reactive barriers, shellfish, aquaculture propagations, improvements to the Salt Pond Visitor Center, on-site wastewater treatment system, stormwater reductions from Route 6, fertilizer reductions, and traditional infrastructure to address excess nitrogen not managed through other methods. Yes, that means basically sewering, traditional infrastructure, yes.
Adele, I understand the technologies involved with these other elements, but I don't understand what infrastructure changes you make to deal with stormwater. How do they deal with that?
Well, one would be to improve the road from which the stormwater is running off. And, but
It has to go
that's.
somewhere though, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, they put in catch basins and those sorts of things. But I don't know the full details of what's wrong with the situation at Salt Pond. But what is happening at both Salt Pond and at Schoolhouse Minister is there is stormwater that is running off from Route 6. And instead of going into a catch basin or wherever these things are supposed to go, they are not. They're going into the water body. And so that would be the reason for a stormwater reduction, something to control that. Now, there was
But
some
somehow-
preliminary work on that, and then it didn't work, so they now looking, I mean, there was preliminary work by the town at looking at something that would stop the stormwater running off into Salt Pond.
Excuse me, but stormwater itself is not contaminated. Somewhere along the way, it picks up nitrogen, which it carries then into,
Well, sure, it comes off the road.
from asphalt?
Yeah, deposits, cars leave as they go along the road.
I could see it crossing people's yards where there was fertilizer, and then wandering on down into Salt Pond, but you have to show me the chemistry that's going on.
No, I can't show you the chemistry. If you want, you can look, actually, if you go into the Cape Cod Commission materials, they have a discussion of the stormwater effects, and that's why they're continuing to work, and there was this big initiative, which now has sort of dropped by the wayside. I shouldn't say dropped by the wayside. It's suspended, whether it will come back or not, from the Environmental Protection Agency to provide new standards and guidelines about stormwater, handling stormwater and that sort of thing. And it was suspended. So, okay. So anyway, those are the methodologies they looked at. The reason there are 3 scenarios is because the Cape Cod Commission requires 3 scenarios. They wanted each of the towns to develop an approach that was what they called using all traditional methods, the traditional methods being basically wastewater treatment, that sort of thing. One, all non-traditional, all what we call the alternative methodologies. And then they wanted finally a hybrid plan, one that would look at both the traditional systems and the non-traditional and sort of pick and choose what made the most sense in the circumstance. Okay, you look at page 3, gives you a sense of what has to be done, basically, with respect to Salt Pond. At first, column, estimated minimum wastewater load, is the load that we calculate based on the water studies that were done by environmental protection, environmental partners, the engineers for our drinking water system. In order to construct a water system, you sort of have to know, I guess, how much water is going to flow. And so this, they constructed water estimates from which these minimum wastewater load estimates are derived. The second one is what was used in the MEP reports. We've talked about the MEP reports before. Now, it's kind of, I guess, old. That would be, for us, that's 2012 is when they did the MEP report for Dorset Harbor. So that's what the MEP reports have. And the last column with the highest number is the number that the Cape Cod Commission is using. We talked about a couple of months ago, the Cape Cod Commission elected not to use MEP numbers where the town did not have a final MEP report. We never received a final MEP with, I shouldn't say final MEP, but a final TMDL. So they constructed their own numbers, and they based those numbers not on material specific to a town, but looking at what the Cape-wide average water use is, and then applying that to the town. So that's where that 1860 number comes from. So okay. Can't read my own handwriting here. Page 6, there is a discussion of possible wastewater treatment sites with the recharge sites. Now, this is not because there is an intention to use wastewater treatment facilities for purposes of Salt Pond. It is because, under the Cape Cod Commission's requirements, we had to construct a scenario that did provide for potential wastewater treatment facilities in order to comply with their requirements, and that's it, and that's the properties that were looked at. It doesn't mean that any of these sites are under active consideration, or we would expect would be under active consideration so far as Salt Pond is concerned, but that's why it's in there. I say that only because every time you mention sewers, some people in town immediately say, oh, everything is going to be sewered. That is not so, as we'll see shortly when we get to what is the recommended approach for Salt Pond. Okay. And okay, those are possible sites within Eastham. And as you see, when they looked on the next page, when they actually looked at what made the most sense for siting for various technology types like wastewater treatment, the first site identified is the proposed Orleans wastewater treatment facility, but as we know, that at least now is not looking very possible. What could change, or could it change? I guess anything is possible, but certainly up to now it doesn't look very possible. What we do know is Orleans is proceeding with its plan. The motion, the article that we talked about on their special town meeting warrant in October for laying the sewer pipes in downtown passed. So I would expect that once the warm weather comes, We will see some construction of sewer pipes there. Now, the sewer pipes don't necessarily denominate the size of the treatment facility, but it shows that they are moving forward with their plans for the treatment facility as they have currently designed it. So that's where we stand on treatment facilities. Okay. All right. PRBs discussed on page 10. And one of the reasons for looking at PRBs and placing a lot of emphasis on them is that they have a 75% to 95% nitrogen removal efficiency, which obviously is very important and very useful if you're going to do something. You want to pick something that will give you effectively the best bang for your buck. Where do you get the most return? And PRBs appear to be it. So that if the current pilots work out and we find the right place for them, there is reason to think that that will have a high yield in terms of what we're trying to do.
Question, and it was in reading the fourth report, but it's clear from what you just quoted that the PRBs are very effective. There's one scenario in the second one, whichever it is, where there's only one that has a PRB, put it that way. And so extrapolating the costs and the fact that only one of the scenarios had a PRB, my implication was that PRBs are really expensive. Is that a fair statement? I'm not talking about cost effectiveness, but just on a sheer cost basis that they look to be really expensive.
My understanding is from the amount of nitrogen removed, they they are attractive. The trick in their effectiveness has a lot to do with being able to, is the plume concentrated or just extremely spread out?
Mary Lou's question, I think, was cost. How much does it cost to construct one?
But cheap, you're just putting down wells. You're not pouring concrete.
So there's a lot of different construction alternatives in the PRB, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Various ways to
One
do
is
it.
traditional isn't the right word, but one is the sort of, dare I say it, well, I better be careful. One is the sort of building the wall type of aspect, that the PRB is sort of a
Yeah, that's the
wall.
way it
The
was
other is
visualized.
what Charles is talking about, which is an injection well. There is more than one methodology. I think what we're looking at right now is the injection well approach.
It said 20 feet apart, 40 feet deep.
Yeah,
The other thing, I think, is the wall or trench, right? If you-
Yeah,
It's not really a wall, it's
yeah.
a trench that you fill.
I think they're talking wells.
They were there,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're talking the
Not
wells.
trenches.
So one of the
But none of them
scenarios
concrete.
just had less emphasis on the PRBs than the other ones?
No, there was only one that had a PRB,
Oh, okay.
and it was by far the most
I
expensive.
thought it was in, I gotta pull up TM4, I don't have it. right in
It's,
front.
what I was looking back and forth at in
Wait
number
a
4, and
minute,
I'm
I
causing
know.
us to
Wait
jump
just
ahead,
a
sorry.
second, if I can find
That's the
it.
thing near Otis? Is that what it was?
Otis?
It's
Otis-
pages
Otis
16 and
Base.
17 in
I mean,
tech
where was
report
this,
4.
PRB you were talking about?
Yeah, 16.
No, she's talking about what is provided. Okay, it's taking it somewhat out of, get this thing up here.
On
Okay.
16, you have the total costs of the,
No, they've got a, well, it's only in one. In Town Cove, they did consider permeable reactive barriers, but only in one hybrid evaluation. They didn't consider, they had 4 evaluations, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. They only considered it in 2B.
to be,
uh,
And 2B
They
is
don't-
twice as expensive as some of the
But yeah,
others.
but no, but that's, no, that's not the big cost factor in 2B. The big,
Okay, that's
big
what I was
cost
asking.
factor is wastewater collection and treatment. That's where the big jump
Would,
comes.
Would you measure
Okay.
the effectiveness or the cost of a PRB in a rate of removal? In other words, you could remove so much nitrogen for so many dollars. I mean, is that how it's expressed?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
That's how they ultimately compare it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, that's right. So the PRB was not the primary difference in
No,
in
no,
cost.
the primary,
That's really
the
what I was
difference
asking.
is a wastewater treatment
Okay.
facility. That's the difference that causes the jump in the price.
I have
And
a
we are gonna get to, just a summary of town, technical memo number 4.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
So in this entire process, we have all these different scenarios. It's just a town process question of, does that get voted on by the town, or does the Board of Selectmen approve what gets implemented?
well,
Curiosity if,
I guess it would get voted on by the town in one sense that the the town now is looking at studies of the PRB and that type of thing, but they would have to do basically a pilot study once they decide where it would go and such, and I would think that the cost of that study is something that would have to be voted on. Now, possibly, I don't know that much about the budgeting process, but I remember in last year's budget, there was an amount for what was called wastewater planning or wastewater something or other. So the amounts for pilot programs, et cetera, I think would be included in that budget line. And obviously, there might be some explanation of what the budget line includes.
So
A
it's-
town meeting votes on the budget.
oh, okay, so it'd be possible that like the town would be like, hey, okay, we decide we want hybrid 2B, right? And then they would need funding for it.
Yeah.
And so then the town would vote on the funding for it.
Yeah. And I know, I don't want to answer this in the sense that I know what the answers are. I just
Oh,
have
no, I just
rough
want to
ideas
know for,
about
like,
what the
what-
budget is. I mean, I think small items probably would be included in budget lines. You're talking about $100,000, small, excuse me. I grew up in New York, I lived in Washington DC, so my frame of reference. But items like $100,000, $200,000 might be included in a budget line and not identified as for PRBs, but identified as for wastewater, whatever.
I guess the
A
bigger,
large, if there was a much larger amount at stake, I would suspect that would be a separate article.
I guess I was just wondering, at what point does like one of these scenarios get approved as where the town wants to go forward? Is that just a decision the town makes itself, or is it one that gets voted
Well,
on?
I
And
think
it
that
sounds like the
yeah.
town makes a decision on one of these things and then
Yeah.
presents it to the town, and then the town is gonna
Yeah.
probably
Well,
approve it or deny
One of the
it
things, as
financially.
I mentioned when we were going over the implementation report, the towns are expected to have a public process. Now, I don't know that we have developed any process for that now, but it's quite possible it will be developed, and that some of these possibilities of remediation treatments will be discussed in public meetings. I know before they finalized the pond action plan, there were 2 or 3 public presentations of what the consultants were finding and what types of suggestions they were making. So there could well be some public meetings. I know that there is in development, there was the first newsletter that went out, trying to think, it's at least a year ago now, trying to think if it's longer than that, on what GHD was doing. And there is a second newsletter that has been in the works for a while, and I would expect would be coming out soon, and that would lay out, some of the things that we're talking about and what's being recommended. And there could well be a meeting or two after that to discuss these things. Ready? Yeah.
I have a question that really relates to your question, and that is, what is this committee's function and role, reference this, and thus ultimately a town decision or selectman decision to go ahead with a PRB? What is expected of us?
Well, basically, how I want to say it, to pay attention to these developments, like the results that will come in. What does it say to us? If we feel we can reach a conclusion as to, is this a sensible or a non-sensible thing to do? That type of thing, and then it would be quite within our purview to make a recommendation to the selectmen as to whether or not it
Okay.
makes sense to
So
proceed.
we would be a study group and we would make a
Yeah,
recommendation.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
That's a very newbie question. I mean, I just.
No, I
I've been
know,
with
I
you a
know,
year,
I
and
know, I
I'm
know.
wondering about
No,
this.
that-
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
question.
I don't know, study group, it's sort of, if it's quite as formal. I think the study group basically would be the committee,
Yeah.
looking at it and saying, oh, yes, we think this is a good way to go. And, or if we have any reservations, we may have none. But, to communicate. We are welcome to communicate with the selectmen at any time, any thoughts that we have on any of this.
Or if there, I guess, are, because my understanding of the committee was that it was formed to help smooth along the process of putting in water, and
Water and wastewater, it also, the charge also refers to.
includes
yeah,
wastewater,
yeah.
but the initial, like.
Well,
when the
because
committee
that was the conclusion of, when the town commissioned the study by Stearns and Forster in 2009 about the whole panoply of what the water issues were in town, their recommendation was to proceed first on drinking water
Yes,
and then get back to dealing with the wastewater issues.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Well,
We're on
so-
number 2.
I guess what would be expected of us, you could refer to that entire process, right? Of
Yeah.
how the committee, what service the committee provided to the community during that entire process, because it sounds like what we currently do might, if sewering comes up, how we function might change, if there's public hearings or meetings.
Well, quite
might-
apart from sewering, I mean, let's not
Yeah,
let's not
no, I'm
go in
just
that
saying that,
direction,
like,
because that, right now, that is the least probable. So
Yes.
PRBs, shellfish,
yes,
those would all be things, if we're considering those approaches that we might choose to weigh in on. And if I get to it before we end, one of the things I was thinking about is, as we look through this now, we get a good sense of what GHD thinks is required for aquaculture in terms of acreage, numbers of shellfish, et cetera, in addition to what's there now. And it had been suggested at the last meeting that perhaps we would ask the staff person for the Shellfish Advisory Committee to come and talk to us. And I was thinking of talking to her about possibly coming in December and sort of discussing with us the possibilities based on what, providing her with information about what's laid out here as to what we would need to do shellfish or aquaculture, and what insights she has as to the availability of this. Because obviously, if we don't have what we need to put the shellfish in the water, then it's a non-starter. But so this would be a way to look at that and get some sense of what's useful or not. Also, she may well have views on you know, one of the issues that we have, obviously, with shellfish is how healthy they are. Do they survive long enough to accomplish their task? And she might have some information on that relevant to what's been going on. You know, as I said, there are 6 aquaculture grants in Town Cove. They're not all ours. But she still may have some thoughts about the survivability. I did, in looking over, I don't even remember which of the reports it is at this point that I looked at. Oh, the feasibility one. That they did not observe any oysters, and there was I think Division of Marine Fisheries, I didn't write down what it was. There's a sort of a look at that area in which they identified suitable habitat for the mussels, the quahogs, the clams, et cetera, but did not mention oysters. So, in fact, I have a note here to send that information on. And is this something we should be looking at? You know, what is the meaning of this state thing? Is it just what they observed or what they think will work? So there's a lot of steps we have to go through before we'll know what's the best way to go.
Yeah, Adele, I could add a little to that. I've gone to the past 2 Shellfish and Waterways Advisory Committee meetings, and it seems like that group is kind of is right now going through a reviving period of some sort. And right now, they're heavily into rewriting the town regulation for shellfish. Apparently, it's just come to enough time has passed since it was last revised such that they need to do it. And it is in some way in conjunction with a similar rewriting of the Orleans shellfish regulation. And it is interesting that the 2 towns over time have allowed members from each town to have a certain permit or status in the neighboring town. That's a bit unusual, as I understand it, on the Cape, but it's part of our tradition. The town did hire a new person who is our shellfish warden. I guess her name is Nicole. Her last name at the moment is escaping me. And as a final point on that, at the meeting, I did meet our new harbor master. So the town has hired a new harbor master. I believe it's Ryan Noland. And I spoke to him a little bit, and I without making that group's work too complicated, I think, yes, it would be appropriate for there be some communication between the 2 committees. I think their next meeting is, I could be wrong, but I think it's the 14th of December. I think it's been announced. As I say, they went through the election of officers in the October meeting, and they to me, it's a real goldmine of information in the sense that everybody sitting at the table actively is involved in shellfishing. They are commercial growers and wild collectors. So I can certainly understand why they put their first effort into doing work in the field and then the second effort into keeping their management up.
Okay, well, I will be speaking to Nicole about the possibility of her attending the December meeting. Yes.
Adele, the difference between Tech Memo 3 and 4 is just geography, correct? It's not
No,
It's not revision of data?
no, it's geography, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we skip ahead. We see on page 18 of Tech Memo 3, sort of the full panoply of what was looked at in the two hybrid evaluations. And you notice that the total removal they come up with is 1,560 kilograms per year. And I don't expect you to remember, but I did write down, that is the MEP number. So it is not the Cape Cod Commission number. And that eventually will have to be resolved by whether or not these water sampling effort that we have undertaken with the town of Orleans in Town Cove yields results which reduce the Cape Cod Commission's number in terms of showing what the actual nitrogen load is there now, and therefore what has to be removed. So that will be another day. Okay, we're running out of time, so I just did a fast bit on Tech Memo 4. I'm not going to try to walk through it. It's just basically I put together their conclusions at the end, which I thought were interesting. And, most of the discussion you'll find is the same discussion of shellfish aquaculture. Obviously, the numbers are different, but the methodologies, that type of thing. The fertilizer and stormwater reduction, I think you all recall, that comes, the fertilizer comes from the fertilizer reg that the town adopted, what is it now, 18 months ago? These dates all escape me. And the stormwater reductions, the work that the town has done in terms of reducing stormwater runoff. Okay. And then there is a figure here for wastewater collection and treatment, although, as I said earlier, with respect to Technical Memo 3, that is not something that, at this point, anyone is considered to be a likely need. It is hoped that these alternative, non-traditional methods will take care of the problem without having to resort to that. And these are the methods that they're looking at. Shellfish aquaculture, IA systems, and the yellow line is the total removal that would accomplish. Again, only the hybrid evaluation 2B yields the Cape Cod Commission's number. So like Technical Memo 3, final resolution of that is going to depend on whether or not the Cape Cod Commission reevaluates that number. If you go down, okay, to the next table, I put these together in a slightly different way than they appear in the report, because to me, they told the story a little more clearly. Here you see the numbers. Again, it's like the first one before. The minimum wastewater load to remove is what we get using the environmental partners' water use numbers used to develop their municipal water system. The middle column is the MEP numbers, and the last column is the Cape Cod Commission numbers that they put together based on looking at average water use across the Cape and then applying it to Eastham. So their number, 2720, is a little higher than what we come up with in the first three hybrids, which run in about 2189, in that area, 2184, 2189. Traditional scenarios here, again, show how much you'd need of this, of each one. Okay, and then finally, the bottom line of what all this means for Town Cove. And obviously, it's very clear why it is very important that the non-traditional methodologies work, which, based on all the available information, we have every reason to think they will, because that last number is primarily the result of wastewater treatment facilities. The establishment of a plant, a site for the recharge area, and that sort of thing. And so, that, I think, takes us through all of it. Somebody has a question?
I'm willing to write down my question and then ask it at our next meeting.
Okay, that's good.
Adele, a thought I had was that if we had some kind of a little, either a task list or an action list, because if you go through TM3, you see certain points that, you know, just are essentially, well, we need to do something more here. And the reason I said that, I don't know if you remember when Roger Dumas was on the committee back 2-3 years ago, he came up with kind of an engineering management list of projects and dates for getting them done and that kind of thing. The reason I say that is because really there might be 10, 12 particular actions in TM3, and there might be as many more in TM4 that just you need to kind of have on the horizon as an action that's coming, so you just kind of stay, so you understand where you are at the moment and what needs to happen next.
Is that something you want to take on, Charles? With respect to TM3, I wouldn't suggest you do it for 2 of them, but maybe if you do it for the first one, and then people can look at that and see if they want to volunteer to do it for 4.
Everybody think that's worth pursuing? I'd certainly do TM3 on a draft for next meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
makes sense.
okay.
What I was going to suggest, and you weren't here at the meeting in which we talked about the committee charge and, you know, the possibility of taking on projects, Suzanne. I'm not directing this at you, but I'm saying you wouldn't have heard the prior discussion. One thing I thought as I went through this and read all the detailed information again about shellfish and what we need, and, you know, how many we need, and what the acreages we need, and what the results are, is I wondered if using that information and then doing a really fairly detailed, intensive analysis of what the results are so far in Lonnie's Pond, if there is some insight we can gain from that. We would know what area did they use, how many shellfish did they put in there, what were the results, that type of thing. But it would really have to be, I mean, I'm not suggesting this is something anybody could knock off in an hour and a half or anything like that. I think this would take a lot of time. You'd have to very carefully detail what it is we're looking at and what it is we expect to get out of it, and then see what they did in Lonnie's Pond, and what did they do, and how did they do it, and what did they get out of it. And I was wondering if anybody would have any interest in taking that project on. Any takers?
Again, you're looking for what?
Information from the Lonnie's Pond project to inform our assessment of what we can hope to accomplish with aquaculture here in Salt Pond.
Okay, so it would be, so Lonnie's Pond already is going to have all of these different.
Yeah,
like,
well, they're in their
analysis and
3rd year.
reports
Oh,
and
yeah,
so on
yeah,
and
they
so
have
forth.
lots of
So I think
reports.
what she's asking for is looking at that report instead of us collectively in our brains being like, oh, okay, well, this is how it would apply to Eastham, or even discussing it. It would be a matter of someone actually creates a document that directly references Lonnie's Pond and connects it to what we could potentially do in Eastham.
There's got to be somebody in Orleans who can tell us what's happened in Lonnie's Pond.
Yeah,
You want
so-
to translate it to Salt
I
Pond.
think she was
It's not tell us,
recommending
okay,
a
Jeff,
document.
I
that
guess I
actually
have a
outlines it.
profoundly different approach to this than you do. I know you like to get a lot of information orally. It has been my experience that when I have had to research things, where I had to be certain I knew what I came out with at the end, that if there was written documentation, I could learn a lot more, and I could be a lot surer of what I thought I knew than listening to somebody tell me what they thought they got out of something. Because people have different slants. And, I mean, the material is all there. There's reams of paper. There are reports on Lonnie's project, Lonnie's Pond, because they had to submit reports every year in order to get additional funding. And also the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel was very interested in that project. That's why they recommended the third-year funding to complete the study. And that's what I would be looking for. No matter how sort of knowledgeable people are, what somebody had to say about it, because for one thing, you don't know, did they hit all the points that we would want to hit? They tell you what they think is important, which may or may not be everything that we think is important to know about it. So it would be really going through paper, pulling out relevant facts from that paper, and comparing them, seeing how what we're looking at stacks up against what they did.
And then what is Charles doing? I
Uh,
said that he
Memo 3.
offered to create like an action step timeline for one of the technical memos. I'm trying to put it in the minutes, and
Sure,
I'm not
yeah.
entirely sure what
No,
to call the thing.
Yeah, what you said,
Action step timeline, draft actions.
the action step timeline, yes, that for Technical Manual 3,
And that would be to use as a reference moving forward if that's chosen.
Well, why don't we,
Well,
why don't we
to
wait to see, excuse me, why don't we wait to see what Charles produces and then decide
Okay.
how we would use it, okay?
yeah. Yeah, to me, the thing is that sometimes you have 3 or 4 actions that are running at the same time. And on a piece of paper, sometimes it's handy to be able to say, oh, yeah, I see aquaculture, here, count oysters.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time,
Okay.
there's somebody over with a PRB.
Yeah,
And
okay.
just so you know, yeah, it's 2 different projects, but it's happening at the same time.
Okay.
If that makes sense
Well,
to you.
I'll do that. But
Okay.
you had started with aquaculture, and I don't want to steal your project.
Do you see my face? I mean, I'm not really prepared to sit down and,
Okay, I
Go
mean, I'd
through-
like to.
if you-
I'd like
if
a
you're
project. I
interested-
can't give you a promise on a timeline,
No,
but
that's fine,
let
that's
me
fine.
go with it.
No,
see
and I
where it
know
goes.
this is an extremely busy time of the year in addition to that,
Does it
so.
give you?
yeah, absolutely. I
Frankly, that's
mean,
not that's why I'm not taking it on.
And, you might want to, the Cape Coastal,
Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning.
and
Yeah.
that would be a
yeah.
really good opportunity for you to hear summaries of a lot of the materials. I haven't looked at the agenda,
Okay,
but I'm sure, they cover,
I haven't looked at
so
that yet
it may
either.
be
but it's-
Orleans might have a case study, I'm not sure,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
certainly possible.
Jane, before you came in, there's a gentleman here, one of the schoolhouse minister abutters, and I had mentioned, anyway, based on my memory of what I thought you said at the October Board of Health meeting, that you had, the Solitude Survey was returned, and that you had sent it to Liz Moran.
Yes.
Have
I actually
we
have
heard from
copies.
her?
Yep, I have copies for everybody.
Oh, good.
By the way, he
Well-
tried to swim in one of the sickest lakes in Wisconsin,
So,
Oh, okay.
right in the middle of the city.
He did say Ministers Pond was nice compared to it.
pass that one
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
The first report is from Solitude, and they did the aquatic survey. And the second is the memo from Liz Moran. I emailed everybody copies, but we are having a major problem with
Yeah,
our email.
I know.
Okay, so I did email it. If it didn't get to you, I don't know where it went.
I couldn't print it.
Okay, so there it is in print anyway. I talked with Liz, and what I'm going to do is, I've invited her to come down to discuss this at a public meeting, at which time we'll invite, the Board of Selectmen, Water Management, Board of Health, have a joint public meeting, but also, I'll do a wide outreach to the Schoolhouse Minister's Pond.
And we have a new, I'm sorry, Suzanne will give you the name and address of the guy who came to the meeting today.
Oh,
He's
okay.
a new, he's
Oh,
he's
great.
different from the abutters who came before.
And he's a part-time resident, and he gave us his other residents to
great.
receive mail
And
from.
Sharon Shipley is still the president of the
Okay,
association.
great. So I talked with Liz about this report from
Oh, no, one minute.
Solitude.
Scott, please, Scott.
And also, their recommendations. We decided January would be a good time to do this meeting for the public, and it would also give her some additional time to research some of the recommendations that are somewhat questionable. Just to cut to the chase, Solitude has recommended maybe alum treatment. They gave us, costs and such. However, if macrophytes are the primary problem in the pond, then sealing the phosphorus with alum in the deeper portions won't get the end result that is desirable. So we need to do sediment analysis, but, in discussing this with Liz, maybe we don't just do sediment on the surface, but we do it deeper. And macrophytes have roots, so they're getting their nutrients from.
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky, and it will give her time to research some of the status of other, options we'd considered, one of which was Solar Bee. And,
Solar Bee is alive and well?
well, it was used in Mashpee. So, again, to get a current status, how is that treatment, just like what you're doing with the oysters? How is that treatment option working in these other towns, and getting a current day, a couple more seasons have gone by, analysis of how those are doing? And this will give Liz an opportunity to really dive into the literature on alum in these, it is a stratified pond, but a rather shallow system. So,
I thought it wouldn't work in a real shallow pond.
well, they recommended it, and they're lake management experts. So, again, I think, that's why I have an expert weighing in on, it's a little bit beyond my level of expertise, so
Do you- when
that's
you
why we
s-
hired a limnologist.
Would this be a regular Board of Selectmen meeting or on a
I
different day?
think I'll post a special meeting, so it'll be a joint meeting. I haven't selected the dates yet. I did talk briefly with Jackie about it, and we thought January would be good. And maybe a Wednesday work session, Board of Health, Board of Selectmen work session, because we can always film this. Mike is so great about,
Yeah.
the video, so that gets out to the public. There's questions day, night, there's never a perfect time, so, usually I find in the wintertime, the late afternoon meetings usually seem to go well, and particularly if you have a vested, interested audience like the Friends of Schoolhouse Ministers Pond. Hopefully, some of them are able to attend, and if not, they can watch it on video. The comments from Liz are draft, but I might send those out to the people that have requested the information and let them know when I select a date for the public session. And that will lead us hopefully to, what do
Yeah.
we recommend for actions for the upcoming year? So,
Sounds good, as long
Yeah.
as you have it before January 29th.
okay. Yeah, okay. I think it was the 6th,
Yeah.
it was a Wednesday, but I think that's a good time, past.
Now, the Wednesdays are
Or at
3rd, the
Christmas time.
10th, and the 17th, and the 24th. So you've got, I don't know when when they meet, so that triggers when the work session is. But it's probably 2 of those are possibilities anyway.
Okay, yep. So that's what I'm targeting, and so maybe you'll get it by email sometime.
Okay.
If you have a minute, I'll give you the update on the meeting that I was just in with our many consultants. We have, it's the PRB grant that I've been working on with, it's a team of consultants now, and I think it's actually the perfect mix of workforce. So we have ES&M, our hydrogeologist that worked on the landfill delineation. We have GHD, who are wastewater consultants, basically, as general contractor. And we have a subcontractor who is working on many PRB projects, Jim Bigley, in Orleans, Falmouth, and he is also an LSP and a hydrogeologist. Had Tom Cammareri, who is a hydrogeologist from Cape Cod Commission. And we're discussing the refinement of all of this watershed work that has been done. And we invited the Cape Cod National Seashore to attend this session with us today because some of our next steps involve park property. So we have a draft report where the first thing we're going to do is reach out to the seashore, give them a period of time for comments, and sort of lay out in a very concise way what our next ask is of them. And we're hoping that this work does not trigger MEPA thresholds, and that we basically can get an exclusion for the, refinement. We need to refine the hydrogeology and triangulate what we know about where the freshwater discharges. And it seems like such a simple thing to figure out, and it's so complicated. So we need that additional monitoring well work.
This is what, fresh water from
From
Minister
the
Schools?
freshwater lens that's got all the
okay.
nutrient-laden water that we're sitting on top of,
Okay.
eventually discharges to Salt Pond and Nauset Estuary. So we need more investigative work to be able to tie together all the points to determine the vertical fluctuation of groundwater and the velocity with which it discharges, because those are all critical factors to defining exactly where that, what the elevation is, because if we miss it, if we don't put our demonstration project in the right site, what has happened in Orleans is they've gotten deflection, groundwater isn't going, they're getting contributions from septic systems that they didn't know, it's influencing groundwater direction. It's very complicated, so you really need to nail down all the details before you move forward with a project. So we're going to lay out a year plan, like a 12-month plan, and get them on board. And it's a challenge when you work with the seashore because they're very protective, which is that's their charge, and it's their mission to protect our national parks. So it's, but that's where we're going, and it's really moving ahead. So as soon as I get comments back from the seashore, we'll hold a public hearing with the findings of the PRB investigation and ask the selectmen we'll have a work plan in place for the next steps going forward, which include many of these options that are included in this, the technical amendment number 3. So that's that.
Sounds good.
And I also want to add another, I might actually dip into some money that was donated to us for pond education. I've been working with APCC on just
It's the
looking at.
Association to Preserve Cape Cod.
Yeah. They've been doing a lot of really great workshops lately, and they're free. You know, I think I've been sending them out. Haven't I been sending them out, these workshops? Okay, good. And we have some green infrastructure for stormwater remediation at our library. And there's been some discussion, you know, the Friends of the Library Pond have also been concerned about Depot Pond. So some of the criticisms were, I don't think people understand what we're trying to accomplish with green infrastructure, meaning plants, so where the stormwater is discharged, it's getting pre-treated in the soil as, you know, the soil is a system that's helping us to take away some of the pollutants that are in the stormwater before it recharges to the ground. So APCC has been doing some outreach with grants that they've received, and part of their mission is to spread this knowledge to other communities. So I thought if, there's a couple of projects in Barnstable where they had really nice placards that explained what it was their green infrastructure was doing as an educational moment. And of course, we want to expand this concept for Saw Pond, if hopefully we ever get stormwater improvement. We'd like to do green infrastructure as secondary treatment. But, you know, just raising, this is sort of a water quality education outreach.
This is an interpretive display kind of a thing?
Yes, exactly. So, you know, I'm going to try to put something together, because we do have some money that was donated for pond education and so forth. So I thought this would be a good group. If anyone has any skill in this area or interest, APCC offered all their materials for us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think maybe what we'd want to do is maybe take some pictures, you know, try to make it as attractive as possible. Neil Andre said he could stick it on a steel sign. I thought maybe we could be a little classier than that. And, you know, just do something in a positive way, working with the library, getting the Board of Trustees to, you know, agree
And
with
then
this.
displaying it at the
And-
libraries at the end.
Yeah, and not only that, but doing some brochures around what is it and how might this help. We have 2 examples right at the library that we could use for education. So if anyone wants to work on that with me, or.
I'm willing to
do
work
it-
on the brochure. I'm not, I wouldn't offer myself as the designer by any means. But, I mean, if you could, you know,
Yes.
show me the materials so I know what I'm writing
Okay.
about and what it's
I
about.
have the examples of what they did. They did some, it's a little bit different. What they did at Osterville Library in Barnstable was a rain garden. So they developed a brochure around the rain
Seen
garden.
that,
This
yeah.
isn't a rain garden. This is green infrastructure. But they have, you know, materials that can help us put this together. And they're very helpful at the APCC.
Okay.
And so, good
I went through
partnership.
this argument for a long time on the Mass Audubon Board. Would it be helpful to at least find out who finally did some very good interpretive displays at Wellfleet at the Nature Center?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. The EPA did one in Barnstable. If you're ever in the vicinity of the Marine Museum, right in that Hyannis Harbor walkway, it's, they have a stormwater treatment system there that they got EPA funding for under that SNAP program. And so it's really pretty. They did a really nice job, and people stop there all the time. I mean, you know, and it's raising awareness.
Yeah, that's important.
And maybe it doesn't look exactly like a golf course, but it's not supposed to look like a golf course. And where do you find the middle ground of educating people about maintenance, our maintenance staff, what needs to be done? It does need to be maintained, so we don't want invasive weeds growing there, but we also don't want it mowed down. So where do you, it's an educational opportunity, I think, for,
And for people to understand what they're seeing,
exactly.
instead of deducing for themselves. Actually, I apologize, Jeff, when you asked me before about stormwater, my brain wasn't functioning. What's in the stormwater is what's coming down out of the sky. That's the nitrogen.
Thank you.
You know, it's called, that is, I guess, one form of atmospheric deposition that we can handle, the only one. What falls directly into the water, we can't deal with. But what falls on the road and
Big
then
ripple.
runs off into the, personal, I hosted a dine-in for 4 couples last night, and was up rather late cleaning up. My head is not as clear as it should be.
Yeah, so that's one, I'm trying not to spread myself too thin. I have kind of a lot going on right now. But I also wanted to tell you about the website, if you don't already know this, that we.
I heard that it's
Okay,
imminent.
yeah,
It's-
and we had an in-house training, which my coworkers didn't need, but I found it very valuable. And I think you're going to find it's much more user-friendly.
One would hope. That's the goal, right?
And I think, I think you gave us a nice compliment. You said the health department website was, I think it's good. Karen does a really nice job.
I think I said much better than the others.
Yeah, so now it's gonna be a more professionally laid out, if you will, so that people have a roadmap. So if you're on one page, the stuff is in the similar location. So, tabs, whatever it is, it's consistent as opposed to, wow, it's apples and oranges and you can't figure out where you are. So I think you'll see a big improvement.
One thing that has occurred to me as I've looked at all this website stuff, and obviously I'm dying to see it and get my hands on it, but there appear to be only a couple of the committees. I mean, we have a clear responsibility to have a working library on our webpage. I think the Conservation Committee does also, but most committees, as I look through it, apparently don't. All they do is they post they meet the open meeting law requirements, but they don't go beyond that on their webpage. Is that a true statement, A? And B, if it is, could somebody from those committees be included as soon as possible on the training sessions?
Well, we have that charge because it was written into our charge, the working library. And I think the
looking
other
through it,
committees that don't.
Not many
yeah.
of the others
Yeah,
appear
yeah,
to. I
yeah.
didn't go through every single
I
committee.
suspect that if one wanted a change in that, you probably would have to talk to the various boards and committees involved and suggest to them that it might be useful.
We have a responsibility for maintaining something. I would like for one of us to have the training that the staff is getting,
I
is my
think
point.
that there is going to be training. I mean,
I
I
hope
can't
so.
say that
Sooner the better.
definitively, but I do think there is going to be training for committee members.
Okay.
The committee members
I
are
could
gonna
check
work
on
it.
that. I believe that you're right.
Yeah.
I know for sure that for those that weren't available to go to the training, excuse me, there's online versions, so it's pretty intuitive. You can do a tutorial. So,
But this is still then the basic
it's not even launched
material
yet.
on their website. I've looked at some of the stuff on virtual cities and schools, whatever it's called now. And that's what we're looking
Yeah,
at
I
at
mean,
this
this is
point.
I honestly don't know much about it, but it's an improvement over what we had before. And it has some structure to it, and I think, it's just a different software package that's better. And there are tutorials, and I can certainly bring your question to, the IT people about our committee's gonna get trained and,
I asked Mike, and he said he thought there was going to be.
okay.
So, okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
A second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections?
What's that?
Any